Hey
Hey,
guys.
Vishy, how are you?
I'm good.
Good
I'm good. How are you, Joe? Hey,
It's
Jeffrey.
going
Good
well,
morning,
going
Vishy.
well. Well, thank you all for taking the time to join me today. I'd really love to hear a little bit more about the projects that you have been working on with regard to HackerEarth, and I know there's two in
Yep.
particular that were cited. So before we really get going here, and the context is really to try to understand where you've gone with this. I'd love to see how it's wrapped into Web3, NFTs, and you don't have to go super technical in here, but I'd love to get a little bit of nuance, a little bit of color to that to give added picture to what's happening in this space and how early adopters of this are actually leveraging the technologies to be able to do something that's different. And in time, we're going to see everyone doing this, but I think you guys are early to the game. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Is there a certain cadence or focus that you want to go through first, one or the other?
Vishy, you can
No.
go first, I guess, right? Talk about HackerEarth.
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. I can do that. Thanks, Jeffrey. So, Joe, just a little background about HackerEarth first. So we are a skills assessment platform primarily, which means any sort of technical skill uh, related to software development is what we are pretty much doing day in and day out, right? And anybody who wants to hire software developers across the globe, we help them identify the right talent and assess them on the skills which are needed for the job. So that's essentially what we do. Now, as part of a skill assessment, what we also end up doing is skill evangelization. And that's where our hackathons platform actually comes in. And that's where you see, the hackathon, which was kind of coupled with consensus and other such events related to Web3 actually come in. So the broader purview is to actually take skills and a skills first approach and then see how we can add value. And one part of that business is basically assessing developers, assessing software engineers. And the other part is skill evangelization and helping groom new talent on new technologies and things like that. So that's primarily what we are into. You want me to cover the Web3 part right now, or I can come back to that later?
Go ahead. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the Web3 aspect of all of this.
Yeah, so to understand sort of how we view Web3 so far, I think when we started out, and we started out 10 years back, and of course there was no Web3 back then. So it was primarily, the platform was built for Web2, and the kind of skills are, that we kind of deal with every day are pretty much your regular software programming skills and software development skills related to database and how you write your code, how can you optimize your code, how do you use different web application development frameworks and things like that. So very Web2 centric sort of platform, right? Of course, we are now seeing the shift in the last few years, and I think this whole DeFi and L2 level 2 sort of developments that we've seen, I think that has kind of given a lot of I'd say it's been an inflection point of sorts where a lot of common developers have started playing around with Web3, right? And we see ourselves as a community of developers as well. Currently, if I tell you the global number, we are somewhere around 7.5 million developers globally who are actively part of HackerEarth developer community. So we see this more as a responsibility as well, that we need to evangelize some of this new tech, whether it is related to smart contracts or your DeFi or your NFTs, all of that space. But we're still very, very early in that game in terms of adoption, I'd say, right? So our worldview right now is that we're trying to bridge the gap in terms of skills, right? Web2 skills to Web3 skills. What does it take to actually become a Web3 developer? And then how do you sort of build mainstream use cases around those skills? That's where we are right now. And I think I'm not entirely sure what is the exact count of Web3 developers right now across the globe. But if I had to make an intelligent guess, it would probably be around a few tens of thousands of developers, not more than that. Assuming we have about maybe 10 to 20 million active users of the Web3 applications overall across the world. I'm just trying to reduce the number from there. But I think even if we have 10,000 developers who are actively working on Web3 applications, I think it's a fair size to kind of start seeding some of these ideas and innovations in people's mind, and then sort of try to engage them around building these use cases. So that's what we're trying to do. And so far, we've had very good success. In fact, the consensus hackathon, the Web3 hackathon that we just had, which I think, Jeffrey, you and your team was part of, we saw close to 6,000 registrations across the world, which is pretty decent given the total, population of such developers. And we are actually running we just concluded another Web3 hackathon that we are hosting on our site, which is Build for Future, where build is actually spelled as BUIDL, just like you spell hodl or hold in the crypto universe. So right. We and that, I think, is sponsored again by Coinbase and Polygon and things like some such sponsors. So I think we are seeing momentum. We are seeing a lot of engagement, but still early days in terms of getting mainstream developers engaged into these use cases. So that's where that's how I see my worldview is as far as our platform is concerned.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you, Vishy. That's great to hear about. So, Jeffrey, I know that you have been involved with this as well from a different angle, but probably part of that Web3-a-thon. So, could you give us a little background about what you are working on, and then a little bit about how that tied into it?
Yeah. So this was actually my first hackathon I participated in. So I've always been interested in Web3. I've been an industrial hygienist for the past 18 years. And so I've worked all over the world, but I wanted to bring Web3 to my profession. And so that's where OccSaviors comes in. So OccSaviors means Occupational Health Saviors. And basically what we're doing with NFTs is that we are trying to tell the stories of those who've been affected in the past. So actually our first story is based on the radium girls who were exposed to radioactive radium paint in from 1917 to the 1930s. And so we need to create that awareness to get more people involved, because there's not a lot of people that do what I do. There's only 7,000 people that are certified in my profession across the world. And so we need to connect with a bigger community. And so the stories of the NFTs, that's the purpose of them, to get that interest. And so part of OccSaviors too is to have like a refer for reward program. So basically those who NFT, we call them the community NFTs, they're able to spread the awareness and education and actually get rewarded for it. And the way we do that too is the sustainability comes in because we're going to be working with like third parties that provide services, products and services, such as consulting services or software services as well. One of our contributors, TerraChain, actually, I'm part of that as well, is a software program we're building on Web3 as well to create a protocol to characterize exposures to health hazards. It's very complicated. There's so many things that are involved. But once we make that protocol, then that information can be fed into the NFTs and actually help to educate the workers who are working in those professions. So we call those professions, we can't monitor for everybody, but we can do similar exposure groups. And those are groups who are exposed to the same health hazards. And so the NFTs allow us to communicate with them and know how we can help them. So basically right now, a lot of the health and safety software programs or platforms are centralized databases. There's a lot of information in those databases, but that information is not being shared across the board. So basically with decentralization and having other consultants use like TerraChain or other software, that will help to create a more decentralized system of data that's being fed into everybody. And so that's where the value of distributed ledger technology comes in. We're building on Hedera because the transaction costs are so low. So for example, we'll have worker NFTs as well. And so the idea is to charge somebody like $20 a year to where this information can come in and they can actually keep track of their own records outside of a company that is currently in place today. So that way they can receive health hazard information, what training they need, what ways to protect themselves. And then that helps they can actually keep their own records. So a lot of times whenever somebody leaves a company, they're not taking their records with them. But they're supposed to, per OSHA regulations or Occupational Safety and Health Administration standards here in the U.S. They're supposed to, and you have a certain time frame to get those records. But in my profession, what I do every day, I see that that's not really being done. And to do an exposure assessment takes a lot of time. But if you can harness the power of Web3 and NFTs and DLT, then by sharing that information, then everybody can win. Those who contribute to providing data can actually be rewarded as well. And by using DLT, you can pay fractions of a penny to somebody. But over time, if that data is being used, the volume, you're talking millions and billions of transactions a day when you look at the number of people who work in hazardous settings. So that volume actually makes it, beneficial to somebody who has that data. So
amazing. Yeah. No, there's so many questions that I could ask both of you, but Jeffrey, let me since you're talking right now, let me ask you one additional question at this point. So if I'm a user of this, do I have my own wallet that allows me to go wherever I want, like a Web3 wallet on HackerEarth that allows me to actually leverage that and then take it wherever I want to go? And then I would definitely want to follow up on the NFT aspect of it as well.
Yeah, so we use Hashback to log into our platform. Right now, we've done the first part of creating the Refer for Reward program. So when somebody makes a referral, we have a survey that we created. So basically, each NFT holder will have their own personal page. And in my profession, it's very important to tell the stories of the people involved. So we have a personal page where somebody can put their story, their message, their experience. And so they can share their link to somebody that needs help. That's somebody that needs education for occupational health. That brings them back to our platform. They can see the NFT holders' personal stories. And then they can actually, if somebody fills out a questionnaire, that lets us know how we can help them and how we can connect other OccSavior contributors that provide those products and services to them. So if somebody needs consultation for legal advice, say they have a work-related illness, we can connect lawyers with them that can help them. We can connect people that provide industrial hygiene services. So I've worked all over the world and have connections all over the world. So the idea is if somebody works, say, in Australia, and I have a friend in Australia that has a consulting business, then we can connect that person with that consultant, right? So, definitely. And then with a Hashback wallet, we're still working on the transactional part for the health data with the contributor we want to create the metadata protocol to where this characterization of the task and health hazard comes into the Hashback wallet. We'll have to work on that part of it. But right now, if somebody logs into our platform with the Hashback wallet, they'll have their own page and they can keep track and timestamp their exposures of what they're exposed to.
Fantastic. No, thank you so much. So Vishy, when you hear stories like this, because your organization brings together tons of people to try to fish out or to come up with new ideas or concepts, how much time and effort do you spend on the Web3 space right now? Is it something that people seem to be almost at an exponential rate of increase in interest in it? Or is it still relatively small compared to the larger groups that you're working with on all sorts of different hackathons?
Yeah, so I think if I had to associate a dollar value with the amount of interest that we are seeing in Web3, I think it would be exponentially higher than Web2. But if you look at the absolute number of developers that we interact with and that we engage, I think obviously Web2 developers far outnumber the Web3 ones. Now, that typically means that while we may be seeing a bear market in crypto, the Web3 world actually is growing really, really exponentially. There is a lot of latent, curiosity in the developer world, and there is a lot of interest that enterprises today have on some of these technologies, especially private blockchains and smart contracts, where they can very easily visualize real world use cases being ported to Web3 and where they can easily create a story in their mind that, yes, this is how I'm going to solve this problem in Web3, which will be, much better than what I'm doing with Web2. So I think that's where we are. But I think one thing that we are also realizing is that it's still not very mainstream in terms of how much people actually understand things like NFTs, and it's not very commonsensical. Sometimes it's very trippy for people to even think that, hey, somebody just sold an NFT for like several millions of dollars, and they're like, wow, how is that even possible? Because I have the same image on my computer. How can you do that? Right? So it's still people are still trying to wrap their heads around some of this stuff. Obviously, guys like Jeffrey, I'm sure you guys know it all, but I think a lot of developers are finding it very hard to sort of connect these dots. And until unless that level of education and that level of evangelization happens, where people are exposed to these ideas and they start to understand this really, really, truly well, I think that point is something where we will see the real inflection happen. That's where we will get the so-called mass adoption, not just in terms of number of people who are benefiting from Web3, but also people who are developing for Web3. And I think that's the later part is what we are really, really keen on developing. So we continue to invest in some of these forums and some of these events that we try to help, whether it is the Polygons of the world or the Coinbase or the CoinDesk. We continue to partner with them, and we try to see where we can go out of our way and engage the Web2 community and get them to sort of move on to Web3 side of things and help them see light, as it were. And I think I was talking to just to give you an example, I was talking to one of my senior devs on my own team, and I gave him an example that, hey, imagine Michelangelo back in 16th century having an NFT empire. That's how powerful Web3 can be. If he had that kind of technology at his fingertips, he would probably have been the richest man on the world, because his art would basically sell for, I don't know, billions and billions of dollars. And he wouldn't have had to be sort of dependent on some of these rich merchants that he was otherwise dependent on. And you could probably create 3D replicas of Michelangelo's David and sell them across the world. So I think what is happening is people are finding it very difficult to bridge that imagination gap that they have, taking real world and mapping it into NFTs and tokens, and trying to really understand, hey, if this is non-fungible, how do I actually put it to use? I think that's where we are. And as HackerEarth, obviously, we are trying to give as much exposure to this developer community as we can to solve for that.
So I think you bring up an excellent point. It's something that I've been battling for the last, I don't know, 5-6 years, even before all of the technical Web3, even though it was Web3 before it was termed that, is trying to educate people, help people understand what it can do and the potential for it in the future. So for both of you, I'm really kind of curious, what do you see on the near-term time horizon that helps people better conceptualize this? Is there something that you think will help them get to the point of, okay, now I understand what an NFT is, or how it relates to, it could be the metaverse or crypto or DAOs or anything along those lines? How do we get this out into the general populace without them seeing it all as crypto, scammy, that sort of world?
Well, I just add to that. Yeah, it's we're bringing something new to like occupational health that's never been done before. So we need to connect with people that work in, organizations, unions, that have never, even heard of crypto before, or they might have, but they think it's scammy, like you said. So that's the challenge and I think the way we do that is like Hashpack. I know since we're working with Hedera, they're creating new ways to onboard people by just using email addresses instead of, having somebody go through and like keep track of their 24 word seed phrase. And so things like that will make it easier to onboard, and we have to do the education as well. So like our example is we want to provide, awareness and education to everybody around occupational health. And so that touches a lot of people. And just for example, there are about 1.4 billion people exposed to hazardous environments throughout the world. So that's a pretty large target market to try to capture, right? And so that's where the education and, yes, this is your own. Yeah, it took a while for people to understand like iPhones and just mobile phones in general, right? So it's going to be that same time frame, I think. But if we have a good use case, and I hope OccSaviors does, that can reach a lot of people, I think that's what's needed.
Well said. Vishy, what are your thoughts on that when it comes to like your realm?
Yeah, so I think as far as the common adoption or the mass adoption of Web3 is concerned, I think it will, if we ever reach that kind of stage, I think it will have to be a very, very transparent layer of technology, and people should not have to worry about or even think about, what is Web3 and am I using it or not using it. I mean, think of a common person who's driving his car, probably a taxi driver or somebody. Does he even know how, TCP/IP or internet works? He doesn't, right? And I think that's the kind of transparency that we have to bring in, and the kind of UX and the the kind of UX that we have to bring in, and that can only happen when apps are built which actually function flawlessly, right? For instance, what Jeffrey is trying to do, or I was reading some other teams submission. One of the teams had done something really nice around agriculture. The thing is, you don't need to educate farmers about Web3 itself. But if you can tell them that, hey, I'm going to solve your problem in a better manner, and you can tell them that this is the tangible benefit that they are going to derive out of using your app, I think that is good enough, right? The underlying infrastructure can continue to scale, and that is upon us, right? People who are involved in the technology, who are involved in the nuts and bolts, to kind of go and figure it out. I don't think it's up to the masses to kind of go and understand what Web3 does and how does it work. So that's my take it.
So it's a great take, and the part that I grapple with, and I love the example you brought up, the TCP/IP part, where we all, I mean, I had to deal with that a long time ago when I was a little kid, when I was playing around with these things way back when, and I would experiment with that. But the difference now in this world order is that we're so used to, all of us across the globe are so used to, for the most part, relying on third parties to own, operate, take care of, maintain our data, our systems. And this is a complete 180 from that. So it's like people have to think about, all right, well, now I potentially have total control over my data, my information. I'm responsible for my private key, of course, the public key. And that's the part that I'm personally grappling with, to try to understand, okay, how do we teach people, one, where there's so many hacks across the board, people are being phished or whatever the case is, how do you properly control that information and take care of it and be mindful of it? And so it's a mind shift for many people. There will be clearly third parties that sort of act as intermediary, but at the essence of Web3, you're really not supposed to have that. The purists would say you're supposed to have the person ultimately in control of that information. So it's going to fall in between, right? Because there's no way that the 8 billion people are going to have ownership of their data and utter control over it. There's going to be something in between. There will be people that will go down that road and continue to do that, but we'll see from that. Does that all make sense? Am I?
No, absolutely. I think if I can just come in on that. So I think what is going to happen is, I don't think we are going to get to a utopia where everybody's is in control of everything that they need to be in control of, right? So it's not like, at least not in near future, you and I can actually control our own identity and have complete privacy in whatever we want to do. And I think that's where compliance comes in. That's where regulations comes in. And I think that's something which is going to have to catch up very soon, because unless that happens, people will continue to get sucked into these Ponzi schemes or something like that, right? And I think governments have to play that catch-up role. And I don't see how we can, while we are talking about completely decentralized applications and whatnot, there has to be a layer of protection around all of this. And I don't see us getting away from that anytime soon. So that's one part of how do we protect so many people, and how do we educate so many people with something new that is happening. Actually, it is not very different from securing your assets with a lock and key. If you're able to communicate it to a layman that, hey, your assets are valuable, and if you have your physical key and a lock, you need to secure the key with yourself. once you're able to educate and impart that knowledge, I think it happens. I'm based in India, and we've seen an entire revolution happening in digital payments with the whole India stack. Today, billions of transactions are happening, through mobile phones, and these are all digital payments. People can transfer money within a split second, and India is still fairly undereducated in terms of the overall population, but people have exposure to the payment stack, which is world class, right? And I think people just picked it up when the need was there, and they were told that, hey, this is how you use it. Governments have to play that role. Regulators have to pitch in. The entire ecosystem has to do that. But I think that is possible.
No, excellent. That's well said all around. So I appreciate that. All right, one final shift, and I'd love to see if there's anything that you all would like to share about. But Jeffrey, when you were trying to think about blockchains, how did you come up with Hedera? Like I've met with many of their people there, fantastic organization. So, but there's so many options out there these days. Of course, Ethereum is probably too expensive, but maybe a layer 2 like Polygon would be an option. What led you down the path of using Hedera?
Well, I've always been part of like the XRP community, but they mostly focus in payments. So it's we wanted something that would apply to like health. And so Hedera, actually, they have a couple of projects building, on the Hedera network using medical, information. So it's similar. So that's why we chose Hedera, the low transaction costs as well. I mean, 1/100th of a penny, we can send information, it's very, very cheap. So that's where Hedera comes in for us. And it's, we've done a lot of research to figure out what is the best cost to charge somebody for this information. I like to go free, but there's just a lot of information, and we have a lot of contributors, that do a lot of work, and that takes cost as well. So just factoring all that in. But the sharing of information, actually having an objective database that anybody can use, is key to like what we're doing. And so doing it on Hedera DLT was the best choice.
Makes tons of sense, and I appreciate that. Vishy, what do you see in your world? Is there a leaning towards any particular blockchain, or is it's kind of everything at this point?
Yeah. So actually, I wanted to comment on that. I think what is happening today is because of lesser number of developers actually in the ecosystem, we are trying out everything that works. That's where we are. So it's more of a spray and pray sort of a technique that people are trying out. Even in our events and hackathons, typically, if we were to do this on a Web 2 kind of a thing, we would have a very specific theme, let's say healthcare or environment or higher education. But in case of Web 3, we typically have a very wide open spectrum of ideas and themes available for developers, because we don't want to sort of filter out anyone who's doing Web3, right? So the idea is to include everyone. So for instance, if Jeffrey's case was served by one of the particular providers, maybe there are other chains, maybe there are other Web3 infra providers where people can actually build their apps better. So I think we're not filtering anything out. We are open to everyone till the time we hit a critical mass of developers where we see, okay, now let's zero in on something specific. So as of now, it's open for all.
Wonderful. Okay. All right. In the last, let's say 30 to 60 seconds, Vishy, once we start off with you, anything additional you'd like to mention about your organization, what you're working on?
Yeah. So like I said, we are very, very skills focused kind of a platform. We do technical assessments for any and all kinds of software developer roles. We also have a hackathons platform. So anybody looking to evangelize any new technology, any new application, new set of APIs, we always welcome them. We help them take their technology to millions and millions of developers across the globe. And we continue to build on top of that. We have a suite of products which organizations have also started using for their internal learning and development programs. So the idea is to keep ourselves very, very skill focused and try to build more and more use cases and actually help developers, reach the right kind of opportunities for them. So that's the end goal for us.
Thank you. Jeffrey, anything that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, we just launched this week, actually. We're just, for us, it's a different way to get the NFTs out there. A lot of projects, they like to do an NFT generator, but we actually have our own marketplace. And the key for us is to make sure, you know, we get the word or spread the word across the world so that we can get people involved that can help people in all those locations. And so that's key for us. And that's why we're doing a different release, you know, to other NFT projects. A lot of NFT projects, they want to, you know, sell as quickly as possible, start trading on the secondary market. However, ours is a little different. They are digital collectibles, but they have utility as well. So that's key for us to make sure that that utility is spread across the world.
Excellent. My goodness. Well, Jeffrey, Vishy, thank you so much for sharing your stories today. I really appreciate it. And best of luck to both of you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Right.